Hi everyone, my name is Tariq. I'm part of the leadership team here in Mesa School of Business. I lead the undergraduate program in business management and entrepreneurship. Just to give you a sense of my own background, I started my career as a founder about 15 years back when I set up an organization focused on helping outstation students find high quality and affordable paying guest accommodation. And ever since that, I've been part of the startup ecosystem. Now, here at Mesa, I spend a lot of my time evaluating early stage startup ideas with the students here, both as part of the UG as well as the PG program. Through this, I've discovered a set of tools, questions, and frameworks that all founders should actually use to evaluate their idea before jumping into building that startup. And that's what this conversation is all going to be about. Before we get started with how do you pressure test your ideas, let's even ask the question, where do you find good startup ideas? And there's no real exhaustive list to look at, but there are 3 or 4 places that you could start off with. The first one is just start with your lived pain, right? Look around you, reflect back on your life and figure out where there are real problems that you're facing. What are the frustrations that you have? Where do you think you're spending way too much money for way too little value, right? So really reflect on your own everyday lives and just really think of, list out all the problems that you face, right? And why you're not able to solve it. To kick things off, let's take a couple of examples. Let's start with the example of Zomato and how it started, right? When the founder was an analyst at Bain & Company. One problem that he noticed was there were lunch menus lying all around and it was not aggregated, it was not updated, it was all fragmented, right? Now let's take the example of Zostel. Zostel was born when the founders actually backpacked all across India and found that there were no accessible, clean, affordable sort of living options for backpackers. And that's the real idea behind Zostel. Another way to find good startup ideas is to look at the second order effects of large changes in the market, right? And this could be changes in technology, this could be changes in regulation, or it could be changes in consumer behavior. Think of what happened when the internet started off back in the early 90s. You saw a wave of startups come up in the late 90s and very well into the early 2010s, right? Think about what's happened after the advent of AI, especially over the last couple of years, right? Once LLMs, ChatGPT, and all these tools have become available, there are lots of new businesses that are built on top of this technology. But most importantly, if you look at the Geo moment, a moment that all VCs and all founders in India will really look upon back in 2016, right, when it actually made internet data very, very, very accessible to the rest of the country. Let's try and take a few examples to actually understand this better, right? Think of Sarvam AI, which is a early stage AI startup based out of Bangalore, right? And they're trying to build Indic sort of large language models for Indian languages, right? And that startup would not have been possible 5-10 years back because the underlying technology just did not exist, right? And Sarvam's been able to ride that wave of AI, right? Let's take another example when it comes to compliance and regulation, right? You've had privacy regulations all across the world, right? Let's take the case of India. Once privacy regulations increased the bar of how companies needed to protect consumer data, you had a bunch of startups like Privasapien, Privado, etc. coming up to service these businesses and help them protect the consumer data much better. And finally, let's take the example of consumer behavior shifts, right? About 5-10 years back, even 3-4 years back, if you really look at sort of quick commerce, none of us really felt the need to actually get groceries delivered to us in under 10 minutes. But now we know what it feels like, right? And because of that change in consumer behavior, lots of new startups like Snabbit have come up to actually deliver services like needs just in under 10 minutes. So those are 2-3 ways for you to actually unpack and see new startup ideas by looking at the secondary effects of large changes in the market. Another way to think of new startup ideas is to cross-pollinate models that have worked in other geographies or sectors and asking, will this work in my geography or my sector? Yeah, a good example of this is Flipkart. Flipkart was started by 2 Amazon employees who asked a question, why doesn't something like Amazon exist for India? Now that you've got a few ideas that you want to explore, let's figure out how you want to pressure test them. There are a few questions, like 4 or 5 very, very key questions that you need to answer before you jump into new idea. And that's what this part of the conversation is all going to be about. The first and the most important question that you need to answer is, who is my customer and what is their pain point, right? This is one of the main reasons that startups fail is because they build a product that really is not solving a real customer pain point, right? And the first question, let me break down that question in 2 pieces. Like, one is, who's your customer? And second is, what is their pain point? When it comes to your customer, it's very, very important that you sharply define it. Like, on one extreme, you can say, hey, all Indians are my customers, right? That's a really poor definition of what a customer is. What you really need to know is, if you had to sell your product to just one customer and one user, Who will that be? Like, how old are they? What do they do during their day? How much money do they make? Where do they spend it? Like, what are their motivations? What are their frustrations? So you need to really, really zero in one customer persona and what their life really, really looks like. The second piece of that problem, what is their pain point, right? And the pain point piece consists of two aspects, right? One is how deep is the pain? If the customer did not solve that problem, right, what are the consequences for them? Is it really high or is it not that important, right? The second part of that question is how frequently does it happen? Does it happen once in their lifetimes? Does it happen multiple times? Is it an everyday problem? Is it really urgent, right? And that's how you should really unpack that question. One important question that you need to answer once you've identified your customer and the pain point is, why is the pain point not solved yet, right? And that has a bunch of sub-questions, including what are the existing set of alternatives that customers are using to solve this problem? Why are customers not happy with the existing set of alternatives or solutions that are out there? The third and the fourth question are largely about the business itself. What about the business makes it hard for them to actually address the customer's needs? And finally, one question that all of you need to get a handle on is, why will you be able to solve this problem while all your competitors will not be able to? That's a very, very key question to answer. The next question that you really need to ask is, why will customers switch to your product from existing alternatives? Right? Human beings are fundamentally lazy. They don't like breaking out existing behavior patterns, and they hate friction, right? So the question that you need to ask is, why is your product 10x, 5x better than existing alternatives, right? Is it significantly better or is it just marginally better? Because if it's just marginally better or marginally cheaper, it's unlikely that a customer will shift to your product. And the final question that you really need to ask is, why will you be able to build this product while your other competitors will not be able to? The next question that you really need to ask is, how much money are you going to make? And to understand that question, you need to ask three sub-questions or three factors that you need to take into consideration. One is, what is the total number of customers that are going to buy your product? The second is, how often are they going to buy that product? And third is, how much are they willing to pay for your product? And one very important thing to note here is not do top-down estimates, right? Do not ever say, AI is a $5 trillion market and I'm going to capture 1% of it. One, the market that you're going after is not $5 trillion. It's far, far smaller. And second, you're never going to capture 1% of a $5 trillion market, right? Instead, what you should do is do a bottom-up estimate, which is what I just shared, right? Figure out what your ideal customer persona is, understand what, and estimate the total number of such people that will buy your product. Second, understand how often they will buy. And third is understand a bit more about how much they are willing to pay for your product. Right? That's how you get to understand how big your business can become. One very important question I'm sure all of us will have is, how do you actually go out and validate your idea? One way is to actually observe customer frustration. So actually go on to Reddit, go on to Google reviews, look at Twitter threads, look at all the places where customers are venting their frustration about an existing product or service. Right. The second way is to actually speak to potential customers. And when I say speak to potential customers, it's very, very important that you don't go and ask them, hey, this is my idea. Will you pay me $10 to buy this product? That's the wrong way to go about it. Instead, what you should ask them is, what about their lives? What are the problems that they're facing? Why do these problems exist? The third way is actually ask and understand if customers are looking at jugaad solutions or workaround solutions, right? And if they are actually trying very hard to actually solve the current problem that they're facing, it means that they're really crying out for a product. The fourth way is actually to build a fake MVP, right? Let's say you're a D2C brand and you want to build a product let's say an apparel product. One way for you to is actually build out an MVP, get a t-shirt or whatever apparel that you're trying to sell and source it and list it on your website. Another way is to actually just create a website, use AI to build a bunch of fake products, list it and see if there's customer traction, right? And with that, you can really, really quickly test out a product without actually sourcing a product. Finally, there's nothing like sales, right? All this research that you can do cannot be replaced by actually revenue coming in because customers actually paid for it, right? So those are the 4 or 5 ways that you can actually validate it. So as you do market research, there are bad signals and good signals that will come your way. Right. And one, it's very, very important to actually differentiate what is a good signal of customer intent and what is a bad signal of it. And that's why we have this chart here. So let's start with the first sort of signal that you get, right? If customers come and tell you, hey, I like your idea, I will pay for your product, that'll actually, once it comes out, it's actually a terrible signal because Most customers don't want to cause you pain or hurt your feelings. And that's why they'll always come and tell you, hey, lovely product, I'll pay it when it comes out. And until then, there's no real pain cost for you, right? So that's actually a bad signal. What is a good signal is actually, look, you're actually observing customer frustration, customer behavior, right? So that's a decent signal if you're really seeing them spending a lot of time, energy, money on trying to solve a problem, right? That's one way. The next one is to actually ask, look, if they're actually using Jugaad solutions, if you actually see them using Jugaad solutions or workarounds, that's actually one very good signal. The third way to do is to actually get customers to pre-order or join a wait list, right? Therefore, that's one very important way to get the demand. But fundamentally, what you need to do is keep increasing the cost to customer, and that's how you get better and better signals. And there's no better signal than like people giving you money to buy your product. And more importantly, repeat users. Once you really have repeat users, that's when you really know that you have a business to run. One final thing that I want to leave all of you with is this very simple framework to think of startups or investing for that matter, right? And I saw this in an article I read on Medium, which said, investing is a lot like surfing. And here is how it goes, right? The first thing that you need to surf is a wave, right? And that's true in startups as well. You need to see a change in customer behavior, a change in technology, a change in regulation, or the rise of an increasing new set of problems, right? That you can really take advantage of and that you can really ride. The second thing that you need is a founder or a surfer, right? Someone who's skilled enough, who has the networks, who has the capital, who has the energy, who has the depth of understanding that can ride that wave. And the third thing that you need is a surfboard or a product, right? Or an idea that you can actually ride that wave on. Yeah, just to conclude today's session, I want to leave you with a couple of book recommendations that's really helped me understand how to approach the first 50, 100 days of a startup, where you're just muddling through a bunch of different ideas and trying to make sense of all the data that's coming your way. And the first book is The Book of Clarity by Paras Chopra. It really gives you a bunch of frameworks and tools to really not just think of and pressure test your ideas, but also to think of your first customers and which ones you should go after. The second book is a classic book on user interviews, which is The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. Thank you, and I will see you next time.